Okay.
With the hemp flower right now, if a law enforcement agent comes up to your car window, you roll it down, he smells cannabis. Basically, that erases your Fourth Amendment right. He can search and seize whatever at that point. Correct?
You know, okay.
And I know that could be argued, but that happens every day.
How about I say this? 3 years ago, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Okay? And 3 years ago, there was a great many police officers who would use the distinct odor of marijuana to tear a car apart. I have a client that's serving 30 years in prison because 4 officers pulled him over and he had his window cracked and they said they could smell marijuana.
Ah.
So they pulled him out and found a gun and he was a convicted felon. So anyway, I think the answer is it's going to completely depend on the cop you run into.
Yeah.
Maryland Supreme Court has ruled against the search based on the smell of cannabis.
Sure, and that's going to happen more and more. Georgia
Yay.
had a ruling in the Court of Appeals about a month ago where an officer stopped a kid who was walking along, said he smelled weed in his backpack. And he testified that he knew the odor of marijuana from his training experience, and the enterprising lawyer who had him on the stand at the motion to suppress actually asked, well, what training experience is that? And the cop fumbled. He couldn't identify when he was trained as to what the smell of raw marijuana was. And so the Court of Appeals said it's not enough. But that's not necessarily saying the smell isn't reasonable suspicion to stop someone or probable cause to arrest them. All that means is that they have to have some experience or training in it. And if they don't teach it at the academy, then they're either going to have to say, yeah, I smoked a lot of pot when I was a kid, or, I've got friends who smoke or something like that. But if they,
I would assume half of North Georgia has their illegal marijuana in one of my jars. If they don't, they're not smart. So if a cop walks up and he sees a green leafy substance in a jar, does he then have the right to search and seize?
Well, these are all different questions about the same thing.
That's beautiful.
Does smokable hemp, does plain old hemp create probable cause to search? And I don't care if it's in that jar or in the back of a truck, okay? The question is the same because it doesn't change, quantity doesn't change the equation, okay? Here are the things you need to think about, okay? Number one, costs $80 to test cannabis, okay? The test that Georgia police use. They're not gonna do that for every user amount that they find. It's just not worth it. Hemp is legal now, okay? Hemp is legal. And transporting hemp interstate, right, and on the roadway, you don't have to be traveling, you don't have to literally be traveling interstate. I could have Georgia plates, but be driving on 85 and get pulled over. If they see something that if they see cannabis, okay, I'm allowed to transport hemp interstate, but I'm certainly not allowed to possess marijuana in either Georgia, well, unless I have a medical license, whenever those issue, or in the United States, okay? So, the answer to your question is that it does not, in my opinion, create probable cause or even reasonable suspicion, okay? Reasonable suspicion is a lower level justification for search that officers can use. For instance, if they pull your car over and they think there's criminal activity, if they have some reason to do that, then they can detain you longer, they can ask more questions, that kind of thing, okay? The search would require probable cause, and the probable cause would come in the form usually of a dog that they would call in if they thought something was going on.
The dog can't tell the
Dogs
difference.
can't tell the difference,
Right.
that's right.
And neither can the police.
Nobody can tell the
I didn't
difference.
know
Well,
dogs
I
couldn't tell the
disagree.
difference.
Wait, we can lance through all of this, okay?
Right.
It is scientifically true that the only difference between hemp and marijuana,
Is the THC.
legal hemp,
Is the THC.
illegal marijuana is the THC content. The only way currently
Right.
to tell that difference is by lab testing. Now, everybody's rushing to develop a roadside test, but I will tell you, anecdotally, that I'm not aware that any law enforcement agency in Georgia uses a roadside test.
Right.
And I'm not sure that there are many anywhere in the country that do. I've heard a story here and there about this, that, or the other. In Colorado, I think, are really pressing hard to get that done.
Hall County Drug task force chief, in an article that came out right after HB847 passed, said that they have a 4-step process that they use to determine the difference between hemp and marijuana, and that for his officers, it's no different than saying they can't tell the difference between grape juice and wine. That it's that obvious.
Well, he's completely full of shit. I mean,
And he may be just
He
for
is.
public stake, but
He is.
yeah.
I mean, he's trying to justify a number of bad searches that his officers have done and will soon do. Okay, they're trying to do that, and he's laying the groundwork for his officers getting caught doing bad searches.
Access to the 20 ounces of oil, low THC oil. How does that play a part in that? If you have this license,
I have mine in my pocket.
right? I have one too.
Yep.
Right. As a veteran, I have to have one, but mine is from California as well. But the reality is, at the end of the day, if we have all these other issues, how are we, those that are in compliance with the law, how do we get protected if everything is against us, even though we're in compliance of it?
Well, I mean, your question at the beginning was, how does having a license to carry around low level?
Yeah, 20 ounces you that would have, according to the law.
Then you need to carry it on you, just like a driver's license. It's no different. Okay. Or gun permit. Okay.
Right.
I mean, if it's something, if it's a thing subject to your licensure, then the prudent thing is to have the license on you. If you get caught without it, you may have some initial problems with the police. But the ultimate issue is whether or not there's a conviction lying ahead for you. And if you have the license, you say, look, I had the license, I didn't have the license on me, I ran out to the store or whatever, forgot it. That's not likely to be something that's gonna catch you a lot of static. Now, you said your license comes from California.
Yeah, I have one there. I was a part of the Prop 215 in 1996 under the medical recreation. I did a lot of work out there at that time. But the point of it is that, as you said, each state has its own jurisdiction, has its own laws that governs how they run this industry, be it recreational, medicinal, whatever. So now here, you have to have, for a veteran, speaking of veterans, first, in order for you to get the license, you have to be a part of the medical program here.
Sure.
Right? And once you get that license from a state-sanctioned physician who says you have to have these particular medical issues to get this so-called license.
And by the way, you forfeit your Second Amendment right to possess a firearm.
Allegedly, as it relates to.
Do. They're
as it relates
denying
to-
on people
right.
with medical.
And then they're claiming they're denying veterans benefits if you have or using hemp, which of course in their own policies is false. And I used to work for the VA, so I know exactly the policy. But the point is, so now here it is, like I said, we're in compliance, we're doing everything in the confines of the law, we're doing everything according to what they say we should be doing, and yet we still, and especially some of us, are still going to jail for following exactly what they told us to do.
I mean,
Horrible.
that's more of a statement than a question. It seems.
Right, it is a statement.
But you're right. I mean, when you're preaching to the choir here.
Right.
I mean,
But as a lawyer who now is going to be representing those in this industry here,
Sure.
we look to you as the guiding light to make sure that we're not put in a situation of uncertainty regarding the law. This is why we pay you our money, right? To make sure that we're protected, at least
Right.
given some type of leadership or guidance.
You pay your money after the police issue comes up, most likely. And here's the problem.
Yeah.
It is a nascent industry. Okay, the industry's a baby,
Right.
and the regulation of the baby is a baby.
Right.
There's not an adult regulating. There's not these experienced people
Right,
who know
everybody's
what's
new.
going on
Right.
who are regulating. It's the blind leading the blind. We're all new to this. The police, we can, I deal with a lot of police officers. I have a really close friend who's a detective in DeKalb County. Not all police are poorly intentioned. A lot of the politicians at the top have agendae that don't really match what the rank and file are actually going to do. Okay? And I'll tell you that the police are going to have to learn just like the rest of us. And there's going to be times when people are going to get arrested when they shouldn't get arrested. And, we go to court, we tell the judges, we try to get the police educated in continuing education, and we win the cases so that there's a message sent to the officers that they have to be more careful. And have that continuing education.
So let me
That's
ask you a
how we
question.
do it.
All right, so let me ask you a question regarding the last statement. I'm gonna get a question too.
Mm-hmm.
Could we, I mean, with this organization and the other organization, go into these police departments, giving them the education they need as opposed to waiting for them to figure it out?
I think that's an incredibly good idea. I had a client who was trying to get started with importing raw hemp. Not to process, but simply as essentially as a broker or as a East Coast distributor for a West Coast farm. Okay, and we talked about it and about that everyone all over the country are having these problems with police. It's not unique.
Right.
Certain. And my advice was, let's find someone in the jurisdiction where you are planning to have this warehouse. And let's go sit down with them and let's talk about what the law is.
Right.
And let's tell them, look, this is what we're doing. We follow right along the law. The law doesn't say anything that I can't possess and sell at wholesale hemp flower. I don't need a permit. I don't need a license. I don't need any of that crap. And I don't want any problems with you guys. I want to be above board. If there's a situation where you think something else is going on, talk to me about it. And we will be open with you because we're not trying to break the law. And I don't know that a Fourth Amendment waiver, written into the law is something that I'm too comfortable with. But I'm certainly, if I have a client who is a completely above board business person just trying to make money.
So the first thing I did before I put a dime in it is I took 7 grams and set it on my police chief's desk, and I said, I want to sell this in your town. And he goes, I bet you do, boy. And
Yeah.
I educated him on what hemp was, because this was January, February of last year. And but yeah, critical step for anybody putting money in.
And the fact is that you might get some hostility at the beginning, but a lot of law enforcement around here aren't really going to get in the way of something like that as long as you're dealing with it.
Yep.
Sir, you've been so patient.
Thank you. I'm coming to this question again, speaking with law enforcement. I have a friend of mine who's got the pot shop in Little Five Points, and he's interested in selling bud, and he's like a big display case, have different forms of bud, raw bud. He's also right now selling these cigarettes because it's going all over the place, and he asked these questions to the law enforcement in the area, saying, next door, everybody's selling these cigarettes. What's the deal? And now we've got this 847 that's coming forward. He's looking at this, going, what's going on because of the different gyrations that's going through. And so we're looking at, well, could he really do it as written now? Could that occur? Then there's another question too about the. As I understand, 847 was and I saw them celebrating on the 3rd floor. They thought they'd made it illegal again in misdemeanor amounts so that you wouldn't have to be forced into the testing situation, because Gwinnett County, they've stopped misdemeanor crimes on cannabis because of the problems of testing and not wanting to go forward with making these tests. And so it could potentially, just as an unenforceable law, by saying for any pothead in the world in Georgia to be saying to the judge, I tested, judge, it was just a cannabis flower, and so, or a hemp flower. And so that's where we're at. That's what I'm seeing in the conflict here is like, how do I speak to the Senate? Yes, tomorrow they're coming in at 4 o'clock. On is this illegal again? What are you doing? Are you just patching a problem for Gwinnett County, and so the law enforcement in High Hero, Georgia, can now prosecute potheads again because they're having trouble? They don't want to pay the $80 in a test. And so that's one of the things I'd like to see more, focus and address. And then there's also the Spillers decision. I put a little link to that on this thing where there was a definition of medical use or medical necessity defense in '78 in the Spillers decision on medical, that they defined it at the time as saying that there is no medical use, and compared it to pornography, and then also had a religion definition as well. And so we're thinking too about the question of personal growth. Could you grow hemp in your backyard for personal in an exemption?
The answer, that's a flat no. at this
that's a flat no as now. But under the Spillers decision, what about that? You know, and so I don't think anybody's really looked at the Spillers decision. I've never seen anybody that even was aware of it. I've tried to bring that to attention of different people, saying, look, here's the Spillers decision that talks about if you have a low THC oil card, you could not only grow hemp, you could also grow and require a pre-trial hearing as a Spillers hearing. So, you know, these are the kinds of things I'm still trying to look at. Maybe, I don't know if you know anything about that Spillers decision, but
Well, I'm not familiar with Spillers. Was that decided in Georgia?
yes, Georgia Court of Appeals in '78.
Well, you know, I mean, the answer you've probably gotten 100 times is a lot's changed since 1978. So
It filled in the blanks that Spillers opened. At the time, it shut the door, but now with the new medical science and the new religious defenses that have been elaborated over the course of these years since then, now leaves Spillers as a gateway to say, this is a medical necessity defense. I don't have the money for your schemes and dreams. I want to grow it in my backyard. I want to heal myself. And we've even seen cases in felon cases up in North Georgia where they said, well, because he's a veteran, we're going to let him go. And they said, well, it wasn't quite like that, but he said if you just go out and get a low THCO card, we'll no process it. They caught him with a helicopter in his backyard growing, no processing once he got the card. That happened.
okay, I believe you.
This is
Right.
white, but this is female.
There were a couple of things that you said that I think I'd like to highlight.
Thank you.
First of all, we need to remember that this bill is in Senate,
Right,
okay? The Senate can still change the bill.
right.
So what we have now may not be what gets put in front of the government. And I forecast that it'll get passed. I mean, I think the level at which it passed the House makes me think that it's not gonna have that much of a problem in the Senate. That's number one. So we all have to kind of sit tight about, you know, what the law is actually gonna say when it gets put in front of the